Right, we are now in the second part of our day, considering Old Testament narrative. So are you on your blue pages? And week 3, page 55? Page 55. And we've been thinking over the last few weeks, or 2 weeks, how to go about understanding Old Testament narrative. Narrative is what? Stories, Old Testament stories. And do you recall some of the things that we've done so far? Do you want to flick back in your notes? Last few weeks, what we said? The first week we really spoke about the power of stories, and also about the fact that the Bible is full of stories that contain stories, and that there are various levels of stories: the personal, the national level, and then the overarching story of the entire Bible. And then last week we thought about the importance of remembering the context in which a story finds itself. And I've been trying to bring across for you a great deal of the time that we don't just use stories as moral messages. Please be like, don't do what. You know, it's very easy to read a story like that. I remember in Sub B, what was that, grade 2, Mrs. Malarba, my teacher from a long time ago, she was so old then, she's got to be dead now. She used to end off every day by gathering all the little boys together, and she used to read us a story, and then every story ended. And the moral of this story is, don't lie, love your parents, don't cheat, don't hit your friends. You know the stories. They're good things for children to learn. I want my children not to lie, not to cheat, not to hit their friends. But the Bible has got a bigger story to tell than that. It's not just moral lessons. It's about the thing that God is doing in the world and has done in the world through Jesus. That's the big story, and all the little stories fit into, plug into, are part of that big story. This week we want to be thinking about the importance of making good observations. Observe carefully is where we're going today. And we saw an example last week in the story of Joseph. Remember we did Joseph? End of Genesis 37 to 50. We saw in him and that story an example of applying the necessary principles to one Old Testament narrative. Today we're going to consider the second step, not just context, but that of doing careful observation if we are to do good exposition. If we are to understand a passage well, we need to read the narrative carefully. Observation. See what is there. And we're going to do that by doing lots of group work today. So the guys who are online, I'll be putting the microphone in the class so you can hear and participate in those groups also. And we're going to begin with Joshua chapter 2. So go to Joshua 2, please. And I want you to, in a minute, be in a few groups of about 4 people, 3, 4, maybe 5 people, as we think about Joshua chapter 2. And what I want you to do beforehand, as you not look in your Bibles, is to tell each other the story, as you try and remember it, tell each other the story that Joshua 2 tells, the story of Rahab. Without looking in the Bible, what do you remember of the story of Rahab? It's a fairly well-known story, but you might not remember some parts of it, and that's okay. That's hopefully why the rest of the people in your group, between you, were able to cobble something together. See how much you can remember. I'll tell you why you're doing that without looking in the Bible in a minute. But let's break up into groups of 3, 4, 5 people. So maybe the table, just turn your tables, turn yourselves around. Okay, so that's where we're beginning. The story of Rahab. I'm not going to tell you much more than that. No clues about anything. The story of Rahab. Where does it? What is the story about?
The Bible describes her as a prostitute, and Joshua sends his spies into Jericho, and she helps them. And because of her help, and when Jericho's razed to the ground, hers is the only house that is left standing. And also that if you trace the lineage, that there's Rahab and there's Ruth in the lineage. Those two are daughters.
Do you remember any other detail about the story?
Another one of the spies married her
Yeah.
in the end.
Yeah. I think I'm trying not to confuse, because I read the book by Francine Rivers, the novel about it, so I'm like trying to sift out what the Bible says. But I think the two spies went into Jericho. And
So they were told to go find it.
no, they were just told to go as spies and just look at the land and see how everything is going. And then she invited them in, and then somebody came. No, she was Gentile. So then the bad guys came looking for the spies, and then she hid them in the roof. And she
Under grass or something.
something like that. And then when they left, she released them.
And she even questioned, even came in and asked her if she had them. And she
Yes.
said no, that they left. So she even
So
lied.
she to protect them. And then she said that they can re-enter the land through the.
Didn't they climb a rope?
Yes, the Scarlet Road.
That was when they were attacking. She had to have the rope outside her window so that they
Was
knew
that just for them to know that, or
that was her house.
or was it also for climbing? I'm not sure.
She must have led them down. She led them down with sheets or something, and they were tied together. I don't know. Maybe the same cord.
Okay,
Maybe it was the same cord, and that was why they were so.
but yeah, it was used to identify that her household was spared when Jericho was attacked.
Whose only household that was spared.
Yes.
Yeah, she got it. Oh, I think
So basically what happened is the wall of
requested
Jericho fell down, and hers was the only house left standing. That's an amazing thing. That's the hand of God, very clearly illustrated. I mean, I found that astounding.
It's the same as all these stories, like Esther, their family being saved, little remnants just being rescued.
I think what's beautiful about the story of Rahab is that she wasn't, as you said, she wasn't Israelite, and it was also showing that God's grace and love extends to the nations, that all the nations, not just His people.
And like God can reveal Himself to other nations, like outside of exposure to His word or whatever. Like she had known about. How did she know that God?
Yeah, and why did she do
Yeah.
that?
Okay, let's leave it there. Let me ask you, how has it gone remembering the story? Very well. Oh wow. Okay, it's confidence. Francine Rivers has confidence. There have been a few books written about Rahab. And I confess I haven't read Francine Rivers. I choose to avoid Francine Rivers strongly. How do you guys go? Okay, now here's my point. I bet you haven't remembered the story as well as you think you have.
True.
But when it comes to stories, we often presume quite a lot because stories are quite easy to remember. This one met this one, this is what happened, they went there, they did this, they said this, end of story. Story begins with the problem, ends with the solution. Now I wonder if you really know the story of Rahab as well as you think you do. And so there's a bunch of questions on your pages that you're going to start doing now. It begins with you reading chapter 2, and then you're going to plow your way through those questions, and then we'll discuss them as you go. So, question 1. Why were the spies sent to Jericho? Stay in the groups. And because we begin by reading Joshua chapter 2, something that you could read it out loud, and then start working with us way through some of those questions. I'll stop here as we go.
I don't mind reading. Okay. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab. Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gates, the men left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly, you may catch up with them. But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given this land to you, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death. Our lives for your lives, the men assured her. If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land. So she let them down by the rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. Now she had said to them, go to the hills so the pursuers will not find you. Hide yourselves there 3 days until they return, and then go on your way. The men said to her, this oath you made us swear will not be binding on us, unless when we enter the land you have tied the scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and unless you have brought your father and mother, your brothers and all your family into your house. If anyone goes outside your house into the street, his blood will be on his own head. We will not be responsible. As for anyone who is in the house with you, his blood will be on our head if the hand is laid on him. But if you tell what we are doing, we will be released from the oath you made us swear. Agreed, she replied. Let it be as you say. So she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. When they left, they went into the hills and stayed there 3 days until the pursuers had searched all along the road and returned without finding them. Then the 2 men started back. They went down out of the hills, forded the river, and came to Joshua, son of Nun, and told him everything that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, the Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us.
Okay. Yes.
So why were spies sent to Jericho in verse 1?
To view the land.
To do reconnaissance of the land prior to battle or to entering.
It just says to view the land. For the spies, they spy on the land.
Spy out, view the land.
Why though? For what reason? They were about to attack the land.
Yeah,
so maybe
prior
they
to
want to
occupation.
know, sorry?
They went to do a reconnaissance prior to occupation.
Suss it out before they took over. Back in chapter 1, what were the Israelites expected to do according to all the laws of Moses?
Verse 7.
7.
Only to be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to my commanded.
Be strong and very courageous, be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave
Obey
you.
it.
Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go.
To obey all the laws.
So I'll read Deuteronomy, that reference there.
Okay.
7:1-6. Says, when the Lord your God brings you into the land that you are entering to take possession of it, and clears away many nations before you. Gosh, and you list all of the nations, the Hittites, the Girgashites, and all of them. 7 nations more numerous and mightier than yourselves. And when the Lord your God gives them over to you, and you defeat them, then you must devote them to complete destruction. You shall make no covenants with them, and show no mercy to them. You shall not intermarry with them, giving your daughters to their sons, or taking their daughters for your sons. But they would turn away your sons from following me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you, and he will destroy you quickly. But thus shall you deal with them. You shall break down their altars and dash in pieces their pillars and chop down the Asherim and burn the carved images with fire. For you are people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be the people for his treasured possessions out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. It was not because that you were more in number than any other people that the Lord set his love on you and chose you. For you were the fewest of all peoples.
Blatantly disobey him. I'm making a treaty. I'm marrying Rahab. That was very disobedience.
Yeah, so like she offered a deal and they shouldn't have accepted in the first place because they were clearly commanded in Deuteronomy to destroy all of that.
And not to make a treaty with them. And don't get married. And they did both those things on the first day after they got that instruction. Oh my God.
No, 12:29.
Yeah, human nature doesn't change, has it?
Yeah, it basically says the same thing. Dispossess them, dwell in their lands. Take care that you not be ensnared to follow them. Yeah, so basically the same thing.
So what were they expected to do? Destroy all
Other nations. Destroy all the nations in Jericho. That's what
Don't make any treaties. Don't get married. Destroy. Yeah.
Where does it mention that she marries though? Because again, it's the
That
book.
could have been crossing rivers. No, but if she's in the lineage, then she must have married.
Yeah, you're right.
So, yeah. Just something with an S. Now with an S. And not wanting to pronounce it because you know you can have an S.
Stop reading books. It's too influential. So destroy all nations and
don't intermarry, don't make treaties.
don't make treaties. Yeah. Okay.
And show them no mercy. But it's kind of like destroying them, not showing them mercy. Do not give your daughter to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons. Don't intermarry. Also, don't give children. But next generation don't intermarry.
So make sure you finish the first 4 questions by half past. That's number 7 minutes.
This happened to Rahab, numbers 13 and 14. So Rahab survives.
He also tells them to be courageous and all that, because
Strong and courageous, initially.
because they are taken over a land occupied with many other different nations. And I'm just thinking of another incident when spies went in, 12 spies went in the border, and how they were scared off. So I think that's why he says be strong, because I'm going to be behind you. Okay, are we ready to move on to number 3?
Yeah.
Number 3, okay. does this happen to Rahab? How does this make you feel as you remember Numbers 13 and 14? Does her survival indicate rebellion? Okay, so
So how does it make us feel? I mean, they were disobedient to the Lord.
interesting to see.
They went into her house. Do you think they would see that? If they went into the
Why did they go to her house?
Like, why didn't they? They went into maybe prostitutes and spare rooms, but like.
They went the room.
Yeah.
I think the Bible doesn't say that they were sleeping with, but it is quite suspicious
They went into her
that
house.
they went to a prostitute's house. But I think maybe she was the only one that opened the doors to them. I don't know.
Yeah, she was expecting business.
Yeah.
Okay, what does Numbers 13? Oh, we're not going to actually do the whole thing, but
When they
it's
arrive at
the
the promised land,
spies sent into Canaan and how only Joshua and Caleb believed God and had faith that God will, but the rest of them said there's giants in the land. We're not going to just do the story with kids club. That's how I know it. Yeah. So the rest of them said, like, we're like grasshoppers here. We're not going to be able to take the land. And then God said, I swear to you that only Joshua and Caleb would enter the promised land, none of the others would, because they did not believe in me. They did not have faith in me.
Just making sure it's remembering that.
Okay. I think there's a relation between Rahab and Caleb and
Was it Caleb and Joshua?
yeah.
Sorry.
There's a relation because Rahab had faith. I don't know whether that's a relation because why are they giving us this reference?
well, in Numbers 13 and 14 is as they're about to arrive there, and they're talking about the people rebelling and saying that fearing going in, rejecting God just as they're about to go in.
And yet Moses' despair is recorded about how they despise him and they don't believe in him. The Lord said to Moses, how long will these people, no, Moses is despair because the Lord said, how long will these people despise me? How long will they not believe in me in spite of all the signs that I've done among them? I will strike them with pestilence and disinherit them, and I will make of you a nation greater and mightier than they. So basically, again, we see people disobedience of God, people. Numbers 13 and 14.
I think there's three parts to the question. So
Yeah.
maybe try to answer each part of it. Does this happen to Rahab? No, it doesn't.
Rahab
She's spared.
survived because of the disobedience.
How does this make you feel as you remember Numbers 13 and 14? I don't know how to relate it. She's spared. Maybe she's spared because of faith, because she believes in the God of Israel, because she makes reference to him. And she says, I've heard of how the Lord of Israel did this and that.
Okay.
Which is in complete contrast to the people that have been leading.
Actually, yeah. So to contrast her faith to people who God has miraculously rescued from Egypt.
Yeah.
She's just heard of
And
that.
she actually deserves to be.
So
Yeah.
It's faith.
I'm just curious about the fact that, again, in 13 and 14, the Nephilim are mentioned, and they're mentioned in Genesis as being giants.
So that's what the 10 of the 12 spies saw the Nephilim, and they were like, God can't rescue us. But only Joshua and Caleb said, regardless of the Nephilim, like, God would be able to, because he said he would be able to. So,
Does her survival indicate rebellion?
Maybe
yes and no.
saying that
Yeah,
faith in God.
I'm unsure because,
I'm also not sure.
in effect, we know that Rahab does a deal with the spies, and then, and God specifically commands them not to destroy. He doesn't send them there to say, in the village you will see this woman, like Jesus does, go and you'll find this man and he will give you a donkey. There's no mention of that, but yes, there is a mention to find, to destroy, not to intermarry.
Yeah, it's a big question mark for me as well, because yes, they did rebel against God. They
There was
didn't
a
listen to what he had to say,
disobedience.
but no, because she had faith and she deserved to be spared, because she believed in the God of Israel.
And how many other people believed in him?
Yeah,
I
I don't know whether.
And that's God's election.
Numbers 13 and 14 is the people rebelling.
Yeah, we'll maybe have to come back to that and move on to number.
Yeah.
This is the details of the story that surprise you or leave you asking questions.
The one that we just
So
discussed.
what's
The one we just discussed, Rahab, the buying house.
Draw your thoughts to a close there. Let's get some feedback. So now that you've read the chapter, was your retelling of the story earlier accurate? Did you get the story mostly right? Okay, but do you see that it's not a good idea just to rely on memory? We often take stories so for granted. And maybe in your rereading of it now you saw that there were a few gaps. The first question I've asked you there was, why were spies sent to Jericho in verse 1? Joshua sends these two spies, go look over the land, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. Why did they go? Why were they sent? From chapter 1's background? To spy out the land? Why? What was the necessity of that? Okay, see how they were going to go about invading the land. Okay, assess the mood of the people. Primarily, of course, they're going because God has given them the land. This is their land, and Joshua, who is Moses' successor, is to lead the Israelites courageously by the law of Moses. And the law of Moses has said what the land is that they will possess. And this is the land, and now it's time to enter the land. They're going to go and possess it because God has given it to them. That's what the law says. It's your land, so go and take it. But at this point, when I'm thinking about spies, I'm beginning to feel a little bit nervous. Okay, we'll get to that question in a minute. But you should be feeling a little bit nervous because we've been down this road before, haven't we? Okay, but question 2 says, back in chapter 1, what were the Israelites expected to do according to all the law of Moses in verse 7? Okay, so you follow the law, don't turn left or right. Okay, so complete obedience is required. But then when you consider what the law says, and you focus on what it says about entering the land, and you go and remember that Deuteronomy 7 and Deuteronomy 12 taught you something about your specific entry into the land, you see, as Nix has just said, that when you enter the land, the inhabitants of the land are to be completely destroyed. Now the reason for it, many people throw their arms up and say, what on earth's going on here, God? What type of God is this? We hate genocide, and of course we do, but why does God do this? Well, He does give the answer that these are people who themselves are dreadfully wicked, and so His judgment is coming upon them because they burn their children in the fire as sacrifices to their gods. And with the removal of these foreigners, it's a means of protecting the Israelites from going after their gods. Okay? Question 3 says, does this happen to Rahab? Well, clearly not. She is not. she's not killed. She does survive. So how does that make you feel? But disappointed that she was spared. Yeah, why didn't they fully believe? Why didn't they fully obey? Why didn't they therefore kill her? Okay, now Tracy feels different. She thinks, this is a good thing. Someone has survived. She has expressed faith in this God rather than rebellion like her countrymen. She has heard and responded. Sure, but also Rahab's countrymen don't respond like she does. She responds with faith. Yeah?
I feel the same way. The mere fact that she had embraced their God and didn't remember what God had done in the Red Sea.
Yes.
She had to despair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so she was also terrified. Well, and fear in the Bible is a very good reason to turn to God. I'm not really against preaching hell to scare people into heaven. Frankly, when you get to heaven one day, you're not going to care what was the motivating factor that you got there. Whether you believe in Jesus because that you remember that opening sermon that you might have heard, or that sermon, that talk, or whatever it was that you read or heard, that resulted in you becoming a Christian. I'm sure if you had a fire of hellfire and brimstone and you became a Christian, that is good news. Do I hear an amen? If you are spared from hell, it doesn't matter how you are spared. Yes, so Ruth, the display of faith in this God, yes. That's right. So Rahab has displayed faith in this God. So the question that we first ask is, have they been disobedient because they haven't killed her? But then when we see that she has expressed faith in God, and she's become one of them in essence, we realize it's not disobedience because she has now transitioned over to the other side. So she can now rightfully be spared. But spies as a whole, of course, make you nervous because the last time they sent spies into the land, they didn't obey. And that's why you're nervous here that maybe their saving of her was rebellion, but actually it's not. She's incorporated in, therefore can be spared. Number 4, list the details of the story that surprise you or which leave you asking questions. What things surprise you? Whose disobedience? Of letting her survive? Well, I'm thinking that question 3 is helping us to see that it's not rebellion, that they have seen her transition into their community of faith. She has become one of them, so that's okay.
And I think that also previously there have been incidents where non-Israelites had turned to the God of Israel.
Yes?
So it also shows God's mercy extending his.
Yes. God is merciful, extends, as he said in his promise to Abraham, his mercy, his blessing will extend to other peoples also, for all those who believe in Abraham's God.
It's quite amazing that she didn't go through the Red Sea.
Yes.
Yet she has absolute faith.
Yes.
God took her to the Red Sea.
That's right.
And yet the Israelites went to the Red Sea.
Yes.
Wanted to wipe out Aaron and Moses.
Yes. So here's the big surprise, that here is someone who has not seen, yet believes, and then there are others who have seen, have experienced, who don't believe. Rebellious Israelites. She's only heard about it. Yep, Siyabonga?
What surprises me is that in Deuteronomy, they were told not to make any treaty with them. And here they are making a deal with Rahab.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
A treaty between nations.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, so the surprise Siyabonga mentions is that Deuteronomy says don't enter into a treaty. but the comment has also been made that treaties are generally between nations, but also this is now, by her accepting who their God is, she has become one of them. So it's no longer a treaty with the foreigner, because now she's one of them. She's become family. So they haven't been disobedient in that sense. I don't think they've entered into treaty. They haven't gone to the king of Jericho and say, right, let's come to an agreement where we won't hurt you if you provide us with water. They haven't done that type of thing. Right?
I think it's surprising that they went and stayed.
Right.
Like, what were they doing?
Yeah.
Like, why did they go to
Yeah. So that's a good question. Maybe it's the least likely place to be found.
The translation and an argument on it is that when we translated the prostitute, it was an innkeeper. And it's even noted as well in this one.
Okay.
I read before in other sources that in the Hebrew, they're not prostitutes.
with an innkeeper or prostitute. What a prostitute. She's not going to.
Okay. If I hear the word Francine Rivers again, I'm just going to stop class. Okay. I'm just going to leave. Just going to leave. Some things I don't cope with, and that's one of them. So the question is: was Rahab a prostitute or an innkeeper? Either way, it's a busy place. But yeah, it is a surprise. I think tradition does leave us with fair certainty that she was a prostitute. Though the innkeeper thing can be investigated, I'm happy to think about that further. But if you were going to, rescue someone, if you're going to have someone being incorporated from the people of Jericho into the people of Israel, you're not really thinking this is the most likely person to be chosen, being a prostitute. Did you find it surprising, the detail that was given to us about what she does with the spies? She hides them on her roof under the flax. It's a bit odd details, that, I thought. Did you notice that her family is mentioned twice in the story? In verse 13 and verse 18 specifically, we are told that you will spare the lives of my father, mother, brothers, sisters, and all who belong to them, that you will save us from death. Verse 18, if you hang the scarlet cord outside the window, then you'll be saved, everyone, unless you have brought your father, mother, brother, and all your family into your house. So it's very specific. It's highlighted. So there's something going on there. It's not just the general, all your family. But I just want to note that down, see if that comes up again. And don't you find it somewhat surprising that in terms of a national invasion going into the land of the Canaanites, one person is singled out? I mean, what does it really matter? Whether she's an innkeeper or a prostitute, it seems a little bit, in the bigger scheme of things, this is rather unimportant. And she becomes, or is going to become, an exception to this annihilation. Okay, so we've got some of these questions in our mind that we need to think through. Now I want you to go a bit further. Question 5, where does Rahab appear again? Question 6, what has happened in between? And question 7, what phrases from chapter 2 are repeated in chapter 6? So just do those 3 questions, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, you guys who are online, would you like to send me some comments there? Where do you see Rahab appearing again? And what's happened in between this chapter 2 that we've been in and the place where you see she appears again? Let's just fill in some of the blanks, in other words. And then question 7 was, what phrase from chapter 2 is repeated in chapter 6? So why don't you send some answers send some answers to me. Just type them in the chat section.
James 2, yes.
Yep. Okay, good question. Where does Rahab appear again? I mean, in the story of Joshua. Yeah, you will find in other parts of the Bible, but not. I don't mean that at the moment. So first of all, what happens? What happens in the next part of the Joshua story? Good, Gillian, that's right, 6:17. Keep going, there's a few more in chapter 6. Okay, why have we all gone quiet? Finished? We're searching hard. Okay, let's check on question 5. Where does Rahab appear again? You in agreement with Gillian? She's answered there. Chapter 6, verse 17. Chapter 6, verse 23. Chapter 6, verse 25. Good, that's spot on. What's happening in that part of the story? This is 4 or 5 chapters on. So if chapter 2 is about the promises made to her, then chapter 6 is the fulfillment of those promises. Okay, so that's why there's the split. The obvious question is what's been happening in between, which is what question 6 has asked. What has happened in between chapter 2 and chapter 6? Right, so Israelites have crossed the Jordan, they've now entered the promised land, yeah? Why? Well, I don't think if they were circumcised, they're going to be circumcised again. Well, therefore, we must presume that they were not previously circumcised, right? So what was the situation? During their time of wilderness wanderings, their circumcision practices and therefore their obedience to the law had fallen by the wayside. So now they are dedicating themselves to the Lord once again as His obedient people and are preparing themselves to live as His obedient people in His land. And part of that is to mark themselves as members of the covenant by circumcision. Good. Then what happens next? Okay, so they've been circumcised in chapter 5. What happens at the end of chapter 5 and into chapter 6? Good, so, and the purpose of that marching around was what? The falling of the walls, the destruction of Jerusalem. That's a strange story. Clearly it's the work of God. Trumpets don't kill people. Walls do not just fall down when trumpets are blown. Priests are not soldiers. Who leads the battle? The priests do. The whole point of the story is to say God did it. God is victorious. God is giving you the victory. Don't become proud. You've got very little to offer or contribute except your sinfulness. And here it is that they have this victory. And so what phrases then, question 7 asks, what phrases from chapter 2 are repeated in chapter 6 as Rahab comes to mind again? Did you pick up a few phrases? Rahab and her family, that's key, that they were spared. So there's this great emphasis that what was promised to be done has now happened. Even her possessions are spared. The New American Standard Bible in chapter 6 verse 25 says, Rahab the harlot and her father's household and all she had, Joshua spared. And that's in contrast with the rest of Jericho in verse 21 of chapter 6, who were devoted, they devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. So the repeated phrase here is that of Rahab's family being spared, which is now the fulfillment of the promise made in chapter 2. Now, remember why we're doing this. We're trying to come to an understanding of the Rahab story. And we could say some simple things so far. We could say, here is a woman who comes to faith in what she has heard about God. And it is right that when you hear about the saving works of God, you come to faith in Him and you put your trust in Him. You're asked to be included in His family. And if you do, you will be spared. That's a good message to teach people, don't you think? Don't stay an outsider. Don't reject the work of God. In our case, the great saving work of God is not the Exodus, but Jesus. If you hear about Jesus, don't keep saying no to Jesus. Respond. Believe what you hear, and when you believe, you will be spared. You will be spared. You will be spared. Your life will be saved. Now, I want us to read a bit further. Question 8 says, after the success of Jericho, what is the surprise of Ai? That town called Ai in chapter 7 is attacked. And what happens? Chapter 7, verse 1. The Israelites acted unfaithfully in regard to the devoted things. Achan, son of Carmi, the son of Zimri, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of them. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel. So what has Achan done? Some things that should have been devoted to destruction from Jericho, Achan has kept for himself. It was a little bit too much to go and destroy everything. So he keeps it. And God is angry. What is the result? They go into battle against the Aites. And they get defeated. Even though they said Ai is so weak and small, we can take them with a small army, they get defeated. And we say, well, how could they go from the great heights of the winnings in Jericho to this great loss now in chapter 7? Well, it is because of what we've just read. And so in verse 10, the Lord said to Joshua, stand up, what are you doing? Down on your face. Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant. And so there's the reason given as to why they have lost the second battle, when we would have thought they would have walked it quite easily. Now, what has that got to do with Rahab? Well, what similarities or contrasts do you notice between Achan and Rahab? Think to yourselves in your group, what are the similarities that exist between Achan and Rahab? Have a look at the stories. Anything that was going to be destroyed, which in this case is everything, was called a devoted thing. It was devoted to destruction. So if there was goods, the idols, the false gods, even people who were to be destroyed were called devoted things. So were devoted to destruction, which in a sense was being devoted to the Lord.
So Rahab did have devoted things because her possessions were also spared, wasn't it?
Yeah, her possessions were spared.
Is that the similarity?
No. Yeah, that's why I read to you from the New American Standard Bible. It indicates that. It was also her possessions that were spared. Okay, so you're thinking Achan, Rahab, you're thinking, what are the similarities or contrasts between them? Just have a quick discussion, and we'll get back together in a second. Tyron, give me the reference for where they run out of food. Where did you read that? So I can't remember. End of chapter 5. Thanks. Oh, I see. Okay. So they're running out of food. There is that now. It's in essence this is the end of their wanderings in the desert, where God is providing for them with manna, that heavenly bread stuff, and He's now going to be feeding them with the stuff that's actually in the land. So now they've gone on from being desert wanderers to being um, enjoying the land of milk and honey. So it's actually a transition, not so much a running out of food. So chapter 5, verse 12 says, the manna stopped the day after they ate this food from the land. There was no longer any manna for the Israelites, but that year they ate of the produce of Canaan. So this is the transition now from being fed by God's hand with manna to being fed by the produce of the land. Okay, let me put it this way. In my notes here, I've got 15 similarities or contrasts between them. Okay, so if you think you've got it, I suggest you keep going for a little while longer.
So basically contrast happening was
Right, let's hear some of the contrasts. Let's write them up, see what we come up with. Let's have a contrast between them. They both, Peter says they both lied. Certainly Achan lied. How did Rahab lie? Okay, she lied to the authorities to keep them safe. Yeah, that might be number 16 then on my list. I'm trying to think how that actually. Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to go with that one. She lied to protect others. Yeah, lied to protect others. Lied to protect self. Okay, as Gillian says. Gillian said they both hid things. Rahab, messengers, Achan, silver. Cool. That's exactly right. Hid spies. Hid silver. Good. Other one? Okay. Achan. I'd like to modify what you say slightly. I like what you say about seen and unseen. Rahab had not seen the Exodus. She wasn't part of the people who had been rescued just before this from Egypt. Achan had. Achan had seen Exodus. He knew all about the Exodus. Well, he wouldn't have seen it, but he knew of it. It was part of his people's story. And yet, who was the obedient one between the two? So Rahab was obedient or faithful, if you want to put it like that. She was a woman of faith, where Achan wasn't. So even though he was more privileged and belonged to the people who had benefited, he's deceitful and disobedient. She hasn't seen the works of God like he had, but she obeys. Okay, here's another one.
So Achan betrayed and Rahab.
Okay, and then another obvious one that Gillian points out is that what happens to them at the end. Rahab lives, Achan dies. In other words, she is treated as Israelite, and Achan is treated as a pagan. So even though she is a pagan, she's treated like an Israelite, and he, though he is an Israelite, is treated like a pagan. Marge, I heard your group mocking it. It was very terrible, but you did make a rather obvious observation that Rahab was what? She was a girl. I'd call her a woman, I suppose. Yeah, she was a woman, and he was a man. The privilege that went with that, if there was anyone who was going to benefit from something in that culture, it would have been the man. But who is it who comes? It is the woman. And who is Rahab? What type of woman is she? Okay, so she's a prostitute. How is Achan described to us? Yeah, so he is from the tribe of Judah. Okay, so he's not just a man. She's not just a prostitute, but he's a man from the right people. He's from the tribe, from the tribe of Judah. She's a Canaanite. We've sort of said that already, and he is a Hebrew. So again, where should the blessing have gone? Who should have benefited? Not the one that it lands up being. What happens to his family? What happens to her family? Family spared. Families condemned. She fears God. What's the contrast? He just does not. So I think I put that under though she's a woman of faith and he is disobedient.
Exegesis, we say here that God despises and sway and deceit, and that he loves faithfulness.
Yes, God despises deceit, loves faithfulness, and that's what we see in each of them. So there it is. She's the obedient and faithful, and he's disobedient. And the outworking is that she lives and he dies. Or you can put it this way: she is saved and he is condemned. What else have we got? Yeah.
He's from the tribe of Judah. Jesus comes from the tribe of Judah.
Yep.
Is Rahab very? Because isn't she in the line as well?
Yes. So she must be included into that line somehow. Must through marriage later on, I guess. Yeah. So you can read Matthew and Luke to see Rahab in the family tree there. So yeah, I'm not sure. She certainly becomes part of the Israelites. How she becomes part of the tribe of Judah, I'm not entirely sure. It must.
Well, we said Boaz is the son and Solomon.
Yeah. Boaz is the son. That's Ruth. Yes. Boaz marries Ruth. Let's just check our stories so we're not getting our Ruths and Rahabs confused. We don't want Francine Rivers to have confused us too much. So, how do we know that? How do we know? Where does it say that? Okay. And who was Rahab married to? Okay, cool. Yeah, and he's in the end of the story of the book of Ruth also. Okay, so she marries into the tribe of Judah. Good? So, yeah, we've said Rahab fears. Rahab fears God. And clearly Achan does not. Even though he has seen the judgment of God, it doesn't bother him, and so he's prepared to do what he does. Even the animals, as the animals of Jericho perish, so the animals of Achan perish. She becomes an Israelite and lives. He becomes like a Canaanite and dies. And so really, these two are being shown to us to be contrasts to one another. They are opposites to each other based on their response to God. So what message is the writer bringing across to us as he tells us the story of Joshua and their entry into the land? That's question 10. What message is the writer bringing across? Do you see that he's not just interested in what happens to the nation, but he's saying issues of individual faith are of utmost importance. We might have said, who's Rahab compared to the whole city of Jericho? So there's no story there. But it does matter. And you might say, who is Achan, one little soldier in the great army? What does he matter? No, he's not important. But Joshua is saying individuals do matter, and individual faith matters. You can't just say that if you are outside the community, you can never become an insider, because you can. Rahab is an example of that. Nor can you ever say, because I'm an insider, I'm always going to be an insider. If you choose to rebel against God, God will treat you as an outsider, as a rebel against him. So individual faith matters. So faith is not about nationality, and faith is not about respectability. Rahab was not respectable, was she? And Achan had everything going for him. He was respectable. But it doesn't help him, and it doesn't count against her. You can be highly unrespectable, if that is a word, and still become an insider if you respond to God in faith. And you can be very much, what do we say, blue-blooded. You can have everything in your family tree could be right. Your background could be right. You could have all the right qualifications. You can know all the right things, know all the right people, but still be an outsider. Okay, chapter 6, verse 23, I suppose that's a question. Why is Rahab going when it done this? Why have we done it? They brought out her entire family, put them in a place outside the camp of Israel. Yeah, so but is your question, Peter, why is she outside the camp but not inside the camp? Well, it might be that at this point she's still seen as a Gentile, saved as a Gentile, included in the people, but not yet in the camp, and that would come not yet assimilated, but soon to be. That's all I can imagine it would be. Well, I mean, certainly the issues of Jews and Gentiles were massive. It was huge. Oh, very good. Yeah, verse 25. So I think it must be a transition. Yeah, must be the transition period. Okay, do you not think that this would be a great sermon to preach to a bunch of people who A, think that they're too bad for God, or B, for people who think that they are acceptable to God? You want to say to those who would view themselves as outsiders, the Rahabs of the world, for whatever reason, you can become included. You can benefit from being spared. You can be treated as one of God's people. It doesn't matter if you've been the equivalent of a prostitute or a Canaanite, an idolater. You can come in. And the question is, have you come in with faith? And then to others you want to say, you might know all the stories, you might know about Jesus, you might be well connected, you might always have gone to church, you might have given money to church, you might have been involved, but it doesn't count unless there is real faith. Are you a person of real committed faith? And of course there's people in both groups all the time who need to hear that message. So what we've been highlighting then is an issue of contrast. Your notes end there with another contrast that we don't have time to look at, and we'll leave you to consider for yourself. The contrast of Saul and David, the first kings of Israel. They are shown in 1 Samuel in contrast to one another. When we meet Saul, he's taller than everyone else. He's handsome, he's strong. When we meet David, he's smaller than everyone else. He's a boy. One's tall, one's small. One's powerful and mighty, the one is a nobody. When we have Saul introduced to us, though, he's out looking for the donkeys. He's a bit of a bumbling fool. He seems weak and a bit of a clown. He's not very bright and he's not very bold. But when we meet David, we see that he's out looking after his father's sheep. He's fearlessly fighting off bears and wolves and lions. Maybe not wolves, bears and lions. The contrast between them is great. Here's the tall, dark, and handsome Saul, but he acts weak. And here's the small, puny little boy who acts strong. And then question 3 says, in the Goliath narrative of chapter 17, who should fight Goliath? Should it be Saul or David? It should be Saul. You're expecting it to be Saul. He is king, yet he's afraid. Who fights instead? Well, it is David who goes off and fights, as you know, and he once again kills the lion who is attacking his father's sheep. And so what's happening in the story of David and Goliath is David is transitioning from being the boy out in the fields fighting off the lions and bears, looking after the sheep, to being the shepherd of God's people, fighting off the real enemies of God, as he becomes king over God's people, the pastor, the shepherd of God's flock. Okay, so there's that contrast thrown between the two. Saul should should be doing it because he's king and powerful. David is small, but because he is God's anointed king, he is the powerful one, and he moves from being the shepherd out in the field to being shepherd of God's people. From winning battles against bears to winning battles against giants and other enemies. Okay, so what we've learned to think of today, one of the tools, in your observation, ask yourself, is there a contrast being highlighted for me between different people? And here the example of Achan and Rahab comes to us if we keep on reading. Okay, we have to read all the way from chapter 2 to chapter 7. It doesn't mean that your talks are always going to be that long, but it does mean that for you to understand the story, keep reading, and you'll see that being highlighted and brought to your attention. And really becomes quite an exciting story to teach. Hopefully one of you will have an opportunity to do that soon. All right, let's have some lunch. Next week we'll consider the subject of plot. All stories contain a good plot. For those of you who like your soap operas, you see there's always a plot unfolding. And certainly in Old Testament narrative also.